We're really excited to have you all here and to chat with you about our topic today. We're talking about training and what it's like to train in the 21st century. But first, I'm going to let Kevin and Robert introduce themselves. Kevin, you introduce yourself for us.
Sure. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Kevin Zodrow, and I work for a mid-sized police department just outside of our nation's capital for many years, the last 5 of which I ran our recruitment and training unit as the unit sergeant. And I joined Powered DMS by NeoGov in 2022 as a training specialist, and I now support our customers with various Power products virtually, on-site, and at conferences. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Kevin. Robert?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Robert Saxon, and I've been with Power DMS for about a year and 4-ish months now. I support a couple different products as an implementation team lead on the Power side. Before here, I worked at a 911 dispatch center just north of Indianapolis. Was there for 6.5 years. And 4.5 of those years, I was with our training and quality assurance division, where we utilized Power DMS, Power FTO, a couple of those different products, and did that for a little while. Also, an active reserve police officer for a small town just north of where I live at, town about 5,000-6,000 or so people. Been doing that for about 8 years, so I still have my hands in the field a little bit. Get to do that a couple times a month.
And hi, everybody. I'm Alicia Conrad. I'm a product marketing manager at Power DMS by NeoGov, and I'm here to facilitate the conversation with our experts here who have been in the industry and to chat with you all about their experience and best practices. So let's dive in here. All right, our topic today is more than great curriculum, training for role readiness in the 21st century. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about some numbers. So we have some statistics that we would like to share with you across the industry, like what's going on nationwide. And we're going to talk about, is great curriculum enough? We're going to talk about how to leverage data in your agency. And we're going to talk about also beyond the recruit. So there's a lot of topics around training for the recruit, but we want to talk about what's next and beyond just training with the recruit. So we are going to dive in here. So this is our first stat. We're diving into the numbers here, and from the PERF report on training for recruits, we can see that 71% of agencies devote less than 5% of their total budget to recruit training. So this might look familiar to you if a lot of agencies around the nation maybe don't have the budget to devote to training. So we're going to talk about how to make the most of what you have. I'm sure we're all familiar with that, do more with less. We've heard that thousands of times. So we know that this is a struggle. Something that is very sobering, this statistic here. So I want to spend some time here looking at attrition on new hires. So Kevin and Robert, we talked a little bit about this together, that we're seeing anywhere from 20% to 25% of first responders are leaving within the first year or so. Some of them we see here, EMS personnel, some of them are leaving during onboarding. So if I could have you, Robert, talk about this first. What has your personal experience been with these numbers? What have you actually seen in the field?
Yeah, so relatively just about the same within our dispatch center. And obviously at times you would have hiring classes that would come in, and our center, we would have anywhere from maybe just 2 or 3 new hires to upwards of 10 plus. And obviously not every time you're going to have somebody that drops off, but obviously, I mean, these statistics prove, and my experience also would tell you, that you're going to lose at least someone, maybe 2 people, and that could be even during the hiring process or that onboarding process. Sometimes after they get signed off, they might be on their own, but then they realize maybe 1-2 months into it, The job's just not for them. They don't like it. They don't like the shift work. They don't like having to work holidays and weekends and all of that. And so obviously that causes stress for a lot of folks, whether that's your trainers specifically, your training staff, your hiring staff, your staff every day that are now having to deal with those shortages. And so obviously it's difficult. It causes a lot of stress and frustration within your center or within your agency.
Yeah. And with these numbers, if you think about what that looks like over the long term, I mean, if you're having 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, you're replacing almost your entire workforce every 4 years. Kevin, can you talk about how you've experienced this?
Yeah, absolutely. It was once said that the answer to recruitment is retention. And while that might not be 100% accurate, it's absolutely a good start, right? And so we've all felt the pains of losing people through the selection process, right? In and through the background investigative process, through the command selection, through, like you said, onboarding or even academy training. But there's absolutely a percentage of these people that make it through all that stuff, but then still choose to leave either in field training or just thereafter. And I think that we can point to training at least being somewhat responsible for a percentage of those numbers, right? So I think, these numbers are kind of astonishing. Everybody on this call today is probably feeling the effects of this, to one degree or another. We may have an anomaly agency that could raise their hand and go, hey, we're fully staffed and it's all good, right? But a lot of their counterparts and a lot of the people that work, in and around them can't say that. And so, we need to find a way that we can get and keep the people that we do train. Robert spoke just briefly about the issue of spending like 9 months in training a new ComTech person, a new dispatcher for the center. That process is belabored on the police side of things, right? Because oftentimes the investigative process, the selection process takes longer, the academy training takes longer. So, that dispatch person, we can get them pretty quick and dump them in the center. And then they do spend, 6, 8, 9 months getting them spun up. But cradle to grave on the police side of things, we see anywhere, from that time frame to double that, to get people in and trained and cut loose to where they really do become an asset as a solo unit, to their department. So it's hard, to compete with that when you're talking about spending 12 or 15 months to get somebody, what you think is the right person in, but then they end up leaving 12 or 15 months, into training.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at these numbers, we've talked some already about what do these numbers tell us, but when we're looking at these numbers of attrition along with the investment that we're able to make as agencies right now into training, and we look at that together, we've talked some about how people might just not realize what the job is actually like, oh, I didn't know this is what it was going to be like. But also, can we talk a little bit about what these numbers mean together, the combination of the attrition and training and what they have to do with one another? Kevin, have you go first.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
No,
I think my apologies. Just playing catch up here on my end. But I think the big thing is that when we have issues with retention that's related to training, those are things that we can control, right? There's a lot that we can't. Some of that you spoke to, people get in and maybe they don't realize what it was. Maybe that department didn't do a great job of advertising the type of agency that they are, like viscerally to their core, how they police, who they police, and that's, in a problem of itself. But training is something that we can control, right? And it has to be something that we prioritize the effort, right? So we have to think to ourselves that is more important than other things or other functions within the department, because that's really what makes a big difference in how our folks interact, with the public, how they perform the job, and then really how satisfied they are in the environment that they're working. I ran a recruitment and training unit for many years. And we often had conversations with our own people that were leaving or with other people that were coming to our department to talk about things like the availability of training and how high quality it was, and whether or not that process was encouraging or sort of discouraging through and through. So, I don't know if Robert has anything to add to that, but I think these things are absolutely paired.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that, there's a lot of focus around the actual training aspect itself, but the new employee's entire onboarding experience as well plays a huge role into that. And so you can have, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but you can have a solid training program and everything you're going to teach them and those check boxes, but there's so much more that goes into just simply keeping that new employee around. And like we talked a little bit about before, as far as, you devote all that time into training and spending money and resources and getting those certifications. And so that's a process that takes some agencies 2, 3, 5, 9, 12 months. If they were to leave, during that process or shortly after that process, that's incredibly frustrating. That's tough. It's obviously that costs money, it costs resources, time, availability. It creates burnout. It creates frustration amongst your trainers, your training staff, but to try to prevent all of that from happening, you've really got to devote a lot more time and effort into what that entire onboarding experience actually looks like for that trainee. Is it enjoyable to come into work? Is it enjoyable to learn this new job, this new role, or do they absolutely despise it and they're dreading coming in and it's another training day? How can we make this more exciting and more pleasing for that new hire?
Yeah, that makes sense. That leads us right into our main question, our title question here: is great curriculum enough? So when we're talking about, just another training day, when we're talking about training, some people's minds might immediately go to what kind of curriculum am I going to use? For law enforcement, are we San Jose? Are we Reno? Are we developing our own? We have a lot of choices when it comes to curriculum, but is choosing the right curriculum enough, or is there more to that? And I'd love for you, Robert, just to talk high level first of what your answer would be for that.
Yeah, and I mean, as it says there, the short answer is no, absolutely not. I touched on it a minute ago. There's so much more that goes into just creating those check boxes. Do we have enough check boxes? Whether you've got 50 check boxes or 1,000 check boxes, there's so much more that goes into that training program. It's the whole onboarding experience itself. Do you have trainers that are pleasant to work with? Do they know how to train someone? Because well, I don't want to jump ahead too much. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. But simply, there's a lot more aspects to look at it other than just, hey, I've got all my check boxes. I've got my right performance categories. Everybody else in the nation uses San Jose, or almost everyone uses the San Jose model. So surely that's going to work for us. And our trainees, there's no reason for them to not stick around. So there's definitely a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah, Kevin, can you speak to that more as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think short answer is no, right? We created a slide for it. Like that's how we, because we all think of that. But honestly, I mean, with today's recruits, you have to leverage technology. The process does matter, and that's what Robert was kind of touching on, is that you can have the best curriculum, but how you employ that, like what you do, if that process becomes frustrating for people, then that's where we start to lose them early in the process. So I would also argue, like when I went through field training, and it's not probably been as long ago as what some people on the call have, but we're talking 2007. I got a 3-inch D-ring binder like handed to me, right? That was my FTO manual, and I had to carry that thing around like I was pledging a frat, from a few years before, right? It went everywhere with me. So I would kind of ask back to this question of like, if that's still your process, like, then how do you know that you still have great curriculum? How do you know that the process is working, right? Like when we talk about leveraging, you know, tools and tech for today's police force, for today's recruits, for today's trainers, there's ways that we can now analyze data across the board that really changes the game and can help to drive a better program, a smarter program, a more efficient program. And I think that's some of what we'll talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah. So let's dive a little deeper, like you said, into these three. Let's start with excellent trainers. So when we talk about excellent trainers, what does that really mean? What do we mean by an excellent trainer? We'll start with you, Kevin.
I think it's somebody that isn't just good at whatever the task at hand is, right? And I often equate this to, I ran our firearms program for many years, and we don't take somebody that's on the shooting line that can shoot high 90s or hundreds, you know, all day long and just like make them a firearms instructor. It has to be somebody who can actually people, right? Can they deliver content? Can they guide somebody through the learning process? Can they identify what's happening back at the gun? And that's why the target looks the way it looks downrange. If you see a firearms instructor staring at the target and not looking at the shooter, they're not a very good firearms instructor, right? And when we look at training, recruit training, you know, responding to calls for service, dealing with people and controversy and, you know, trauma and all these things, we need somebody who can really, you know, help that person or guide that person through a process of learning, right? And that's the big difference when it comes to having somebody that's an excellent trainer. They certainly have to understand viscerally what they're teaching, but it goes way beyond that. And they have to know how to reach people, how to guide somebody through the process.
Yeah, I feel like a light bulb just went off for me when you were talking about looking at the target versus looking at the shooter to know what they need to improve. Because I imagine if you have a trainer that maybe is just focused on, you know, they're an amazing officer, they're an amazing dispatcher, telecommunicator, what have you, first responder, they're going to be looking at, are they doing these reports correctly? Are they checking out the boxes like we've been talking about, but maybe not back to the behavior, back to the understanding and the education and looking at the right thing. And that's what makes a really good trainer. That's just light bulb for sure.
Yeah, just
Robert,
to piggyback off of,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you know, being on the shooting line myself and having a good instructor that can tell me the very fine specifics of, you know, my finger placement on the trigger and how that's impacting, or he can see that I was, you know, kind of anticipating the shot. So they're paying attention to those fine, but then also being able to relay that in a way that I would understand it, because I might be able to talk to Kevin or maybe some of you on the call. I could throw out some lingo and whatnot, and you would understand, you'd get it. But maybe somebody in that new hire position that's new to this role isn't going to understand the everyday lingo that we just use and throw out. At least they were not going to get it at first. So that communication method of how do they know how to tweak that communication so that the person receiving that message actually isn't just hearing them, but also understands it. And then being able to test their knowledge of, you know, are you getting what I'm giving you? And another point that I always like to point out is, you know, being able to also equip your trainers to be successful as well, and giving them that support. So do they have the right equipment? Are they just simply writing DORs out manually, those daily observation reports? If that's the case, then do they have everything that they need? Do they have the binders? Do they have the pens? Do they have enough pens? Do they have enough ink? You know, so are they being trained on how to train someone as well? I know in the dispatch realm, there's a couple of different, you know, APCO and NINA are always kind of the big names in the dispatching realm. But have they gone through those classes and know how to effectively train that new hire? So making sure that you equip their trainers to be successful.
Kevin, can you talk some more about that in your experience about what's the right way to equip our FTOs, CTOs, and preceptors to do training well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see here on the slide a streamlined process. So in addition to, having them adequately trained to understand adult learning and how to be good teachers or facilitators, we need to make the process, like, maybe not easy, but we need to make it comfortable and something that they can navigate without all that frustration and stuff that we were talking about earlier. We kind of spoke before the call a little bit about how when I went through FTO, like I feel like I got the two best, FTOs I could get, right? Very complete different people, how they police, what interest in police work was very different, right? One was a day shift, like through and through to his core community policing. The other guy had been on nights forever, right? But was a drug and gun hound. And so I got kind of both aspects of that. But we spent so much time in a clunky, antiquated, old process that was all paper driven, that I wonder now, right, looking back at that time, like how much more could I have experienced when I was with them for those 4 or 5 weeks each, before going to third phase or whatever. Like if we had a process that was streamlined, that made sense for the trainee, that made sense for the trainer, and we could easily go back and add things or fix things or change things. Like I just wonder how much more I could have been exposed to in those first 12 weeks of field training than what we had. Yeah, I think streamlining the process is very, very important, and training them up, the right way. Like you can't just grab somebody and like, oh, hey, like congrats, right? You've been kind of voluntold that you're next on the list for training. You need somebody who they want to do that. They want to impart, that knowledge and that wisdom and those experiences into the next person or into the next generation, so that they can kind of carry things through.
Yeah. What are some best practices, in both of your opinions, on how to incentivize becoming a trainer? Because like you said, we don't want to just volunteer people that don't actually want to do it, that aren't inspired to do it. I will start with you, Kevin, since you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think in addition to, and we can kind of go down a rabbit hole here, right, on a million different ways that you can incentivize stuff, because you do have to make it worth their while, right? At the end of the day, like I would say field trainers and first line supervisors, right, sergeants, are probably the two most important roles in any department. And so, you need to create a program that is lively. You need to create a program that and sort of encourages and entices people that they want to be a part of it. So in addition to those other things about how you pay them, or during that period, what they get paid, whatever, I think having a process in which they believe in, something that you're showing them, like, hey, we're investing back in this field training program because we know it's important. You guys are doing a great job, and we want to make it as easy as what we can for you to get involved and to stay involved. I think it starts with that, right? You could have the best of intentions. Somebody wants to be a trainer, and then they get into that program and they realize that, hey, we got the newest, cruisers, the newest light bars, the best body armor, right? We've all got body cams and flashy uniforms, but we don't pour time, energy, or effort into our field training program. And that's going to turn them away. So they're either not going to look at it to begin with, or they're going to get in and get involved and then want to sort of back out, right? And kind of like Homer Simpson into the bush. Everybody's seen that meme, right? Where he just kind of sinks into the bush. Like that's what they're going to do.
For sure.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, so then once they're in it, I learned about this a class a couple of weeks ago, but what's in it for me? What's in it for them? So once they get in there, so yeah, are they going to get a couple extra bucks? But then also moving forward, talking about their just job progression. So, I mean, how can they move up into the training realm itself? And are there specific training sergeants or training lieutenants, FTO coordinators, and is there incentive going that way, moving forward as well? They're not just going to be stuck at an FTO or a CTO level. How can they keep moving forward through their career? That's one of the more rewarding things for them, and what drives a lot of people. But I'd be interested if folks out there also have other different incentives too that they've seen works well for them, and maybe they can share those in the chat, so that kind of stir up some ideas for other folks too. But definitely trying to, something that at least it motivates me, is how can I progress through this career? I don't want to get stuck somewhere. keep me moving forward. That's what's rewarding to me.
Right. And we talked a little bit, the three of us before, about that getting stuck and that burnout in these roles for trainers. So not only do we see attrition with new hires, but sometimes these trainers get so stuck that they start getting burnout. I don't know if you can chat about that really quickly, Robert, first.
Oh, absolutely. As a trainer myself, I was kind of the one that got the, I don't want to say problem children, but those that need a little bit more attention and help and guidance through the training program. And while I appreciate being trusted to try to help them get through the program, it was also very tiring, very exhausting, because obviously they require a lot more attention than maybe those that are getting it right off the bat. So are you divvying up the workload evenly and effectively? Yes, you have those trainers that are rock stars and can absolutely help anybody, and especially maybe those that need that attention. But at the same time, are there enough breaks? Do you have enough FTOs to where you can give them some breaks? Different things to consider as well.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, I just think that this is the twisted web we weave, right? Like, we're talking about how, recruitment and retention, and whether or not we spend money on our stuff, and then FTOs and losing people in the process. Like, this is that, right? It all comes crashing together, and that FTO is just kind of at the center of it, right? If, they're likely they were picked to begin with because they are good at what they do, but they also have some level of excitement and exuberance, and like they come to work, jazzed up, not dragging their knuckles like a Neanderthal through headquarters. Like, so we want to be able to carry that through and not sort of tear them down and burn them out to where, like, hey, like that guy or gal, they trained up 3 or 4 people, they're awesome, but now they don't want to be a part of it anymore. No, what we need is to, keep them motivated and excited, and I believe that some of that process or some of that, cause and effect is the process itself. And that's where, this comes into play.
Yeah. All right. I'd love to talk about this all day, but let's move on to our next point here. We want to talk about trainee development. So obviously trainees are the focus of training, yes, but we want to talk a little bit about development and mentorship and how it should look different than just curriculum. So my question for you all is, what should the philosophy of our training be, and how does what you're focusing on make a difference? We'll start with you, Kevin.
Yeah, I think it has to really be born and bred, the idea of mentorship, right? Taking somebody from one place and then sort of step by step guiding them through the process to get to the next place, right? We often say that the academy doesn't prepare you for police work, it prepares you for field training. Field training prepares you for police work, right? And so they just have to want to be involved in that process. And it's definitely, everybody on this call knows it's not a check the box kind of thing. That has a whole host of its own liabilities and issues that come with it, right? It comes back to the, like, you either pay now or you pay later kind of deal, right? We see that throughout a lot of, aspects of our lives. But I think when it comes to this, I think if you invest in your FTOs and your FTOs invest in your trainees, then ultimately you not only get a better product, but you stand greater chance for retention over time.
Mm-hmm. Robert, can you talk some about that, and then also about feedback and how important that is through the process?
Yeah, I a huge proponent of feedback and how that's given. That communication has to be a two-way street between trainee and trainer, and you have to have that open communication throughout the entire training process. So whether it's on the day of training or recapping at the end of the week or at the end of the month, having that open communication between trainer and trainee is absolutely vital. And you don't want to wait until the absolute end of the day to give that training back to the trainee in the dispatch center. If you sit down at the beginning of the shift, you take a call, and that trainee just royally screws it up. You don't want to hold on to that information until the end of the day, because then they're taking 2, 3, 4 more calls throughout the day, and they're just going to keep doing the same thing, and it's going to become a habit for them because they don't know any better. And so they're training themselves on that. So then at the end of the day, you come back and you go, oh, hey, well, all those calls, you kept messing them up. And it's like, well, why didn't you tell me at the beginning when you knew it was a problem, so that I could retrain myself and do it right the next time? And so that's where that feedback is just absolutely vital. And then to allow the trainee to also give feedback. So whether that's on the specific trainer that they're with, or if it's the training program as a whole, it's very important to get feedback from the trainee that's actually in those shoes and how they're perceiving that information, and how they think the training is going. Maybe they think that they should be taught another way, or there's another means to get the point across. Maybe they've got an idea that would be awesome to share with other trainees in your training program. Getting stuck in that one method of just training your entire program is very dangerous, because everybody learns differently. As we hopefully, those that are on the call, hopefully we all know that everyone learns differently. So we have to make sure we keep that in mind with our entire training program.
Yeah. So talking about getting feedback from trainees, what are some other ways that we can talk about how to improve our programs? So, a favorite quote of mine, if everything stays the same, everything stays the same. So how can we take some best practices, and what are some actual steps that we can take to look at how to improve our program or know if it's successful? Kevin, start with you.
Yeah, Robert started to kind of touch on it. A lot of that comes back to analyzing data, getting feedback from both your trainers and your trainees. I would even maybe weight that a little heavier on the trainee side of things, because they're the ones going through the program, right? They're the ones that are being exposed to, hopefully, multiple trainers over a condensed period of time, with or without other people, by their side, sort of rotating through some of those same people too. But that's where we can find consistencies or inconsistencies, who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong. And I think some of this conversation has to be around efficiency, right? Because if ultimately through our training process, we want to expose them to as much as we can in that condensed period of time, then belaboring the idea of documenting this, debriefing that call for service before they can get back out and go experience something else, is kind of important, right? Because we end up spinning our wheels a lot and wasting a lot of time when they could be out being the police, right? And there's a whole separate conversation to be had about getting the police back to just being the police. But especially in this role of trainer, trainee, like, we need them not only to be motivated to go see and do as much as they can, but actually have the ability to do that.
Yeah. Robert, can you talk more about that also, but about measuring success, and how do we measure the success of a program? Is it just, hey, people graduated and they're on their own now? Are there other things we can look at, or what did that look like in your role, and what are best practices there?
Yeah, so a lot of it, especially for doing paper DORs and those paper checklists and whatnot, you don't really have any solid way to produce reports or produce statistics around how successful or how good your training program really is. Again, you could have the best curriculum, or you think you've got the best curriculum, but how do you actually measure that? Really right now, kind of like you mentioned, it's really just, well, we seem to have, a lot more people that are graduating or getting released versus those that are leaving. So it seems to be working okay, but it's hard to try to come up with that data unless you're manually inputting it into these, manually created Excel sheets or Word documents. And a lot of that's just simply sifting through papers and going, okay, well, it seems like, so I keep going back to that phrase, it seems like, and that's really the only way to really kind of measure and look at that is, it feels like, or it seems like we're doing it right, but where's the data to really kind of prove that? And so being able to actually have hard data, hard statistics, and truly measure that is really where you're going to know, okay, yeah, we need to improve in these areas, or things seem to be going well here, let's focus in this other area.
Yeah. Kevin, can you share your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing here, right? We often talk about how cops can't stand being stagnant but hate change, and really that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. But if you're going to improve something, that means you constantly have to be looking at it and evaluating it, and you can't just do that based on how you feel or how someone else feels. Like, you got to have something substantial to support why you're making the change that you're making, right? So I think, you know, you got to look at how it's working. You got to find out how you're gonna measure that. A lot of these old clunky manual, processes don't allow for that. It's, it's quite the opposite, actually. Like, it would almost be kind of crazy to ask somebody to go back through like my trainee documents and find out how many times I did a traffic stop versus how many times I responded to a bank alarm. Because there's no easy way to do that other than line by line, page by page, through all 12 weeks of training and all however many 200, DORs that were written. Like, it's just not possible, right? So again, the twisted web we weave, like, we can give time back to our people. We can, make it easier for them to evaluate the program, to make changes, to continue to have this thing go and grow and evolve into something that's, good, maybe even great, that other departments, want to model after. And not just like, we're just doing it. This is the way we've always done it, so that's how we're going to continue to do it. Like, that is not, everybody knows that's not the answer.
Yeah. I'd like to move into Robert. When we're talking about paper and how painful that process is, can we talk about what is technology's ideal role? We know that nothing is a fix-all, nothing can solve all of our problems. That would be great. But what is the ideal role of technology to support this process?
The primary role is to enable your trainers and free up a lot of their time. Technology, I mean, while it can be painful at some points, right, it could also be an incredibly huge asset to anybody, really, as long as you understand how to use that. But being able to allow that trainer to more effectively and efficiently fill out a daily observation report, as an example. If you're having them manually write a DOR, a lot of times they have to take time at the end of the shift to then go in and manually write all of that. And then at that point, especially if you work maybe a 12 or 16-hour shift, what you did at the beginning of the shift is absolute mush. You don't remember what actually happened during that, unless your trainer is diligent and has time to manually write down notes while they're in the car or on the fly in the dispatch center. So, you're going to have more documentation, allowing them to get that in there quicker and easier. But then also, the trainer is going to have more time to actually devote to training itself, because they're not having to spend so much time physically writing out these forms. They can then refocus and actually give that time to the trainee. Maybe that's, going through scenarios. In dispatch, we call them ring drills. So just simply coming up with scenarios and throwing them at the trainee and giving them more hands-on time. It absolutely enables that trainer to do more than just physically documenting and writing things down.
Yeah, and it sounds like more of what they're actually excited about and what the role actually entails. So instead of writing everything out by hand, they're actually doing more of the training. And like you referenced earlier, Kevin, being able to be exposed to more and learn more because you're not spending as much time on paperwork. That's really powerful. Can you talk a little bit about, Robert, about the trainee handoffs that we have here? Can you explain a little more there?
Yeah, So a trainee is not going to go to just one trainer, most likely throughout their entire training program. They're going to go from, from one trainer to the next. Maybe they'll have 2, 3, depending on your agency and how long that training program is, upwards of 5 or more. And so being able to hand that training off from one trainer to the next manually, with manual DORs and paper DORs, is absolutely painstaking, because when they go to that new trainer has absolutely no idea where that trainee is at. They would have to physically flip through pages of DORs to try to get an understanding, if they even have time to do that. And oftentimes, I mean, if they're going to an opposite shift, if they're going from a day shift to a night shift, those two trainers, they might not even ever see each other on a day-to-day basis, let alone, have time to then have an actual handoff meeting over to that new trainee or that trainer. So then where this technology would come in is being able to allow that trainer to then see those previously filled out DORs and know where they are before that trainee even gets to them. So then it's going to be a lot easier of a handoff process. They can just pick right back up where they left off, versus essentially having to start brand new right over.
Yeah, having to start from scratch. I imagine that's really frustrating. Kevin, I would like to direct this question to you when we're talking about beyond the recruit, right? So we've talked a lot about training and the in-field, in-seat process and what that looks like for a new hire out of academy or out of basic training. But can we talk a little bit about best practices for training beyond the recruit and what that should look like for our agencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we're talking about, new roles, new responsibilities, right? So somebody is advanced in their career, maybe they were promoted or they were moved to a specialized unit where really this process kind of starts over again, but historically, agencies don't treat it the same, right? You get maybe a new person into an investigative unit. There's a ton to learn, right? There's certain experiences that they need to go through, or certain classes or courses that they need to, attend, right? So they're kind of certified in certain things or certain methods. So the cool thing is, like, we can leverage technology beyond just recruit training or just beyond CTO training. And now we can do it for sort of every step or every new role, responsibility, or specialized unit that somebody might go into. So, some of those best practices might be to establish, that baseline of training, right? What are the courses, the classes, or the documentation specific to that role that they need to be proficient in completing or issuing or whatever. And then ultimately, in a lot of these things, it's about experiences, right? So the same way that in recruit training, we want somebody to respond to a barking dog complaint, a check fraud, right? A domestic assault, a crash. Like, there are those same things in all of our specialized units that people need to experience. And they don't do that on their own the first time. They go with a seasoned person. It's kind of this mentor-mentee or trainer-trainee relationship. But what we don't find is that often the process is formalized, let alone documented, right? And so leveraging technology can help you to do that, to establish a progress or a way to monitor progress throughout that period of time and make sure that, everyone's getting sort of the same stuff, right? And they're on track, they're on par to be, kind of released. And it somewhat formalizes that mentor-mentee relationship, right? Like, we're what we don't see is that, a 5 or 10 year cop that's getting moved into a special unit being treated like the same way that a recruit would be, right? So that part of it's different, but we can formalize the process to make sure that they're getting up to speed in an efficient and effective manner. And now we have all that documentation that if and when something does go wrong or go right or whatever, and we have to substantiate, their training in that specialized unit, then we can pull down those reports, pull down, that information that we need to, and make sure that, things were done the way that they should be done.
Yeah, can you touch on, you and I were talking about your experience when you moved into a specialized unit and what that looked like with pairing up with people and how your call outs were different than what a standard call out would be, and what best practices can be for pairing people up with a mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first went into an investigative unit, each of our investigators at the time were on like a 1 week on-call rotation, right? So from, Sunday to Sunday, if something happened, they were the one to get called. But as the new guy in the unit, like I needed to experience all of those call types as quickly as possible so that I could become an asset and a resource to everybody else that's in that unit, right? The reason I got an opportunity to go in there was because somebody left or the unit was growing, based on what their caseload was or whatever. So it was like there was a need. I wasn't just there for fun. Like I needed to get to a place where I could support those people and be an effective, investigator. And I needed to do that as quickly as possible. So I ended up on call all the time, right? And I'm like, that's okay because the rapes, the robberies, the this, the that, right? The mob assaults. Like I needed to go to all that stuff and experience it, see it, be a part of that investigation so that I could do it on my own at some point, right? But having a way to monitor that and not just circling back and going like, hey, have you been to this yet? Yeah, no, I think I did that my first week back here, right? Like why?
Yeah.
Why? There's such a better way now to do that stuff. It's almost astonishing to think that we just kind of let like things unravel and don't really have a way to monitor or keep track of what's actually taking place.
Yeah. Robert, I'd like to talk some more about that on how technology can help with this new role training as people move into a sergeant or lieutenant position or, from call taker to dispatcher one. Can you tell us, what can technology do to help?
One of the biggest things, and one of the things that when an agency comes to me during implementation is that they want to streamline their process. I hear that keyword all the time. They want to streamline things, no matter who the trainee is with, and no matter who that trainee is. So whether that's a new hire, or they're going from call taking to dispatching, or they're going from the road to canine to investigations, an EMT to a paramedic. They want to streamline those different employee movements. And so having that technology, having that base manual per se in there to cover all these different training tasks, no matter who the trainee is with. They want that trainee and trainer to always go through the same things every time, whether it's systematic or that, again, that streamlined process. It's there for you, and you can create those tasks or that program for any role, really, to make sure that you've justified everything that they need to cover in that training process. Because like Kevin kind of mentioned, you just kind of get thrown into that sergeant seat, and it's, not so much trial by fire, but sometimes, you pass our application process, so here you go. You want to make sure that sergeant's still equipped to know how to handle escalations or a complaint or going through roll call. Same with the communications officer. I mean, maybe a new supervisor. You want to make sure if it hits the fan, do they know who to call and who to notify and what they need to do to actually handle that job. And it's a huge CYA as well, being able to cover yourself if that were to come up in the future. So whether that's, the trainee comes back and says, oh, well, I wasn't taught that. Well, we go back to DOR 5, here it is, and this is where he signed off on it. Or if it comes up in litigation, being able to find all these forms easily, not losing them, being able to download those, export them, you have them at the ready to be prepared. It's going to make you and your agency look better and have a lot more credibility when you're ready to go, instead of going, we're trying to find these forms. We'll get those to you when we can.
Right, when we find them down, in the filing cabinet somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I want to touch on really quickly FTO, Power FTO, our product at Power DMS. We've talked a lot about new role training, but the field training process, the in-seat training process across public safety, and just how important it is to have great software that supports you and is a partner for you. Some of the benefits that you can see just from software and technology in general that we've talked about is being able to save time and resources, be able to enhance your program with data, support your trainee success, and ensure role readiness across your agency. I don't want to belabor the point, but I'd love to hear from you all your time in the industry. Can you share a story about how technology did help make a difference or could have helped make a difference, something that you wish you had had while you were in your roles? I will start with you, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples. At one point, I think I was the highest paid photocopier in Northern Virginia, right? Like all of our process at one point was manual, and so they would type it all out. They weren't like handwriting, but they would type out to fill out their DORs. The trainee would sign it, the trainer would sign it, it would go up through the chain of command, and it would come to training. And my unit was responsible for storing all of that. And at one point we stored them, paper copy, and then we started storing them electronically. And so we would de-staple, right, all these DORs and then stand in front of a copier and just and then have to go into the computer and rename them and then store them in the right place. So that's crazy, right? Like we're way beyond that with technology today, that we can build in workflows. It can go up and come back for revisions. All that stuff is timestamped, so it doesn't get lost. Everyone on this call has a lieutenant that their desk is a black hole, right? It doesn't get lost on that lieutenant's desk. So we can see those timestamps to go, hey, this was sent up, it made its way up, back down, and then back up again, but then it stalled somewhere. Why is that? And then the second thing I'll give you is I'm a numbers guy through and through. Like I want to know, I kind of want to know what's going well, but as a first line supervisor, my bigger concern is what's not going well, right? So I need to be able to see things like how many times has this trainee been to a traffic stop or a crash versus a domestic assault. Well, if when they go to phase 2, the phase 2 trainer is saying, hey man, their officer safety's a mess, they're not asking the right questions on a domestic. Cool, well, how many times in phase 1 did they go to a domestic? With an old process, there's no way to find that answer unless you're searching CAD or you're going back through DORs or something like that, right? But now we can start to balance things out and go, hey, you know what? You've been to plenty of crashes. I'm good. I know you know how to handle a crash. Property damage, personal injury, doesn't matter. You're good. So another trainee, another unit is going to handle any crash in our sector, and we're going to stay available for any domestic or any robbery or any this, because that's what you need, right? So how do we create a process that's not only more efficient, but that makes sense? Like, let's do things that make sense. And that makes sense. Let's get the trainee exposed to the stuff that they haven't seen a lot of and stop making them ground and pound the things that they're already good at, right? And without analytics, without some way to data mine what's happening, not to mention like when we look at how people rate people and things like there's just so much that can come out of the data that's involved in this. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, a lot of value there. Robert, how about you?
With Power FTO, I used it at my dispatch agency previously, and just being able to immensely save time. And sometimes it's even just the smaller semantics of where if a trainee receives a score of a 2, you require a comment on that score and why. And if you've got that on paper, I mean, there's no requirement that they have to physically write that out. I mean, there's no way to physically stop them from putting it into an inbox or wherever. And then it sits there for a week. Then that sergeant finally comes back to their desk, looks at it, and then they review it, and then they go, oh, you're missing comments. So then they got to throw it back into the FTO's mailbox that they don't check for another week. So it's this long drawn out process. Whereas, with technology or with FTO, where you could say, hey, no, you can't submit this until you actually give me comments, or you can't submit this until you've actually given me a score on all these performance categories. And so just even those small little things like that can create such huge just delays in filling out some of these forms. And that's how you get all these forms that are missing in the paper shuffle. So just simply saving time by that. But then, like Kevin mentioned, being able to measure success and get reports and find out what's not going right, and then even setting up alerts to where ahead of time that a trainee might be going down the path of not responding to training, Instead of that being subjective to the trainer's thoughts and opinions, let the data tell you that, hey, this trainee got a 1 4 or 5 days in a row. They might not be responding to training. So setting off the bells and whistles ahead of time instead of later on down the road when it's too late. They've already given up, they're mentally just exhausted, they've already checked out of the program.
Yeah, where you don't know until they're exiting or dropping out.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, it's been great. We are coming up on the end of our time, but it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate both of you, talking about how retention really does start with great training, and talking about how we need to invest in excellent trainers, attract the right people to the job and then not burn them out, and how not stopping at the recruit level is really a best practice, that we need to take this throughout our agencies into every role to have that documentation to cover our back, make sure that we are operating with excellence, and then how partnering with technology really can be that extra oomph to get you where you need to with workflows and established processes. So it's been a really great conversation. Really appreciate you both. For everyone on the call or watching later, these are some resources that we have linked in the slides. Again, you'll get the slides in the morning. We have an article about 5 tips to set your field training officers up for success. Also, the perf report that we talked about briefly at the beginning, we did link to that, 40 guiding principles for police recruit training. And there are a lot of great practices for training in general in there, so check that out. We also have a resource center for Power FTO if you're interested in learning more about the product we discussed at the end. And if you are a customer on the call, I want to let you know that we do have a Power DMS University training. We have courses for Power FTO, so if you are a customer, those are free to you. So be sure to check those out. That is linked, so you'll be able to go directly to that link and log in and check out some more of those courses if you're interested in how to build out a program for your additional roles. We are happy to provide that help for you. If you haven't dropped your questions, if you have questions, please drop those into the chat. We'll get to those in just a second. I also want to highlight for any of our customers on the call, we have a customer user conference that is coming up in October. It's October 17th through 19th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Ignite. We will be sharing best practices there. We will have experts there to help you with your product. It's going to be a great conference. All 3 of us will be there. We're very excited. So if you want to come meet us and say hi, we'd love to meet you. Feel free to scan this QR code. It will take you directly to registration where you can register. So I'll leave that up just for a second, and then we will get to our Q&A. And also we'll be sharing the slides. So if you missed the QR code, if you can't get that scanner up in time, you can check that out in our slides in the morning. All right, Vanessa, if we could get you back on for any of our questions that we had come in.
Yes, so we did have a comment come in. This came from Dayton, Ohio. This was during when you guys were talking about kind of recruitment and retention. Essentially, they kind of outlined that they have several vacancies at their agency. They said that they really have an issue trying to get people even interested in law enforcement or even getting them to apply to these positions. He said, in 29 years with the agency, I've never seen it this bad. So what are maybe some tips you have for maybe even getting people to apply to these open positions, and kind of, inform people better on, like, the different positions that you even need to train?
I think that one of the biggest things, at least in the dispatching realm, is that the job itself can be very intimidating. There's a lot of technology itself. There's the shift work. There's obviously high pressure with that. And I think one of the biggest things is being able to show them and prove to them the type of training that they would receive, and giving them the confidence to be able to come into the role and say, look, we have taken folks that have no public safety experience at all, and being able to equip them with the knowledge that they need, and we have the resources, and we have the technology to be able to actually give that to you and be able to handle that role. And I think that easily translates over, and whether that's law enforcement, the fire EMS realm, is just showing them that you have the capability to train them into that role. Kevin, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a loaded question for me, right? I don't know like how much time we have, but this was my wheelhouse for a long time. So just a few things to throw out, and I'm happy to carry this conversation, beyond this forum here with, I think you said it was Dayton, Ohio, right? But you have to have a social media presence. If you're not already advertising through social media, then you definitely should be. You need to honestly depict the agency that you are, right? And how you engage the community, the type of area that you police, the things that you do. If you have a part-time SWAT team that goes on, a couple calls a year and maybe works in conjunction with a bigger county unit, your social media posts don't need to be like rappelling out of helicopters, right? Because that is a microcosm of the things that you actually do. But you need to show the things that you do, right? And whatever that is, right? However you help people, however you engage the community, it has to be a very real picture of the agency that you are. You also need to figure out what you do better than anybody else in your area, right? How do you incentivize certain things? What makes it attractive? Why have you stayed there for 29 years? I think that's what they said, 28, 29 years, something like that, right? So again, there's a lot to this, but those are some things to be thinking about. It's not what it once was. I'm with you. You have twice I did 15 years, 6 months, and 19 days. Not that I was counting, but when I tested in a local high school with 300 people for 5 positions, and that was in 2006, right? As I ran our unit, from 2017 to 2022, I saw every process, those numbers decline and decline and decline and decline. But we had to find creative ways to get people involved, right? Ride-along programs are huge. We got into the local, like, criminal justice high school, sort of vocational school programs, and we would send our subject matter experts into those classrooms to try to, like, foster relationships, get people interested, right? And just do things that other agencies weren't doing to put us on the map. Like, that's the big thing, is putting you on the map. We could talk forever about what you should be incentivizing or how you should be incentivizing it. But, things like take-home cars, pay, benefits, beards, tattoos, like, it's the way of the world. So I'm happy to talk to your chief if they're stuck in the mud on beards and tattoos, but that's a good place to start too, in addition to all this other stuff.
It's always a touchy subject there.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and close with this question. We did get a comment. They're basically saying that they feel like they train the same things over and over, but because there's little to no accountability, the training team often feels like they're pounding their heads against the wall. Their question is, how can they get the command staff to understand that holding people accountable to certain standards is not dropping a hammer, but is necessary for growth?
Oh boy, that really touches me personally there, because I face some similar issues where I think just trying to get everybody on board is tough, and so trying to really just spell out, okay, what are our main goals, what are our main objectives, what are we trying to achieve, and then spelling it out from there. How are we getting there? Trying to get their buy-in, and it's obviously, getting your number one is important, but also everybody else. Everybody has to be on board with the same goal, the same picture. So really just spelling out what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and these are the steps to get us there. And one of the biggest things is liability. Do you want to be liable? So when it comes to a training program, if you aren't holding folks accountable, you're opening yourself up to a lot of liability. So do you want to face that? When it comes to training, do you want to simply just throw somebody out on the floor or on the road that hasn't been really trained? Hopefully the answer is no. And so this is where that training program comes in to spell all of those different steps out so that you're covered, your trainers are covered, your training staff's covered, your trainee is also covered as well. I always kind of go back to liability when I faced any sort of, slamming my head against the wall, because I've been there, and trying to, stitch up my head. This is why we're trying to do this, is to prevent that liability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just add that the police, like, transparency and accountability, the idea of that, like, that no longer comes from within. That's coming from outside. That's the public. We are in a place now in today's world, in today's society, where there are no options. You don't get to choose how transparent you are or choose how accountable you are. So that command staff needs to understand, like I mentioned it earlier, pay now or pay later. You can either invest in your people and train them up right, and they'll go do, like, great things, go forth and do great things, right? Because at the end of the day, you give them a gun, you give them a badge, and you tell them, hey, go do great things. And oh, by the way, you're probably going to take somebody's freedoms and liberties from them at some point. But let's make sure that we do it constitutionally correct, within moral boundaries, within policy, whatever. So when those things don't happen, then we have to identify what that issue is. Was that a policy issue? Was it not covered in policy? Was there a moral obligation that they missed, right? Or were they not trained properly? And when it comes back to training, and we can look at, lawsuit after lawsuit, across this country where things ended very poorly for that local jurisdiction because they weren't properly trained, or because they didn't prioritize and emphasize training to begin with, right? If you look at what it takes to be a barber, an electrician, a cosmetologist, like, look at any of these other trades throughout the US and the amount of hours it takes in order for somebody to be signed off on to do that job by themselves, and then compare that to what your academy hour training hours are and the total amount of time they spend in field training. And in the majority of the country, it is probably less than half, right? Those numbers are crazy. Like, yeah, I'm getting a haircut. They could stab me in the neck, right? But probably not going to happen, right? They're just cutting my hair, and they have to have astronomically more one-on-one training than what a police officer does. So, like, it's been said, like, get on the bus or get out the way, right? Like, training is so important to make sure that things don't go wrong outside of the four walls of headquarters, that you have to prioritize, emphasize, and fund those initiatives.
Right. I know we are well over time, Vanessa. Do we have any other questions? I don't want to leave anybody hanging.
Nope, we're good to go.
All right. If anybody does think of any questions, we do have that contact email that was at the top of the slide. Please feel free to contact us. We are more than happy to chat with you more. And all three of us will be at Ignite, so you can come meet us there. But please do always feel free to ask any of us questions. We're happy to talk about it. And Kevin, Robert, appreciate your time. Vanessa, thanks for keeping everything going. And we really appreciate everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
See you guys. Thank you.